History remembers many tyrants: Nero, Caligula, Stalin, but there exists a ruler so catastrophic, so blinded by paranoia and power, that he single-handedly orchestrated the systematic destruction of the very people he swore to protect. This is not a story of conquest. This is the story of King Leopold II of Belgium and the Congo Free State. Between 1885 and 1908, an estimated 10 to 15 million Congolese people died, half the population under his rule, not through war, not through plague, but through a calculated system of terror, mutilation, and exploitation that turned an entire nation into a death camp, disguised as a business venture. 1884, the Berlin Conference. European powers gathered not to discuss Africa's future, but to divide its flesh. Germany wanted colonies. France expanded its empire. Britain tightened its grip. And Belgium was small, insignificant, but its king had ambitions that dwarfed them all. Leopold II wasn't satisfied being king of a minor European nation. He studied other empires obsessively. He wanted wealth, legacy, immortality. But Belgium's parliament refused to fund colonial adventures. So Leopold made a decision that would seal the fate of millions. He would acquire a colony privately, not for Belgium, for himself. The Congo, nearly 1 million square miles of pristine wilderness, 76 times the size of Belgium, rich in ivory, minerals, and soon, rubber. Leopold had never set foot in Africa. He never would, but he would own it, completely. Leopold was a master manipulator. He formed the International African Association, claiming his mission was humanitarian, to bring civilization, Christianity, and commerce to Africa, to end the Arab slave trade, to help, not harm. The Europeans believed him. Even the United States, the first to recognize his claim, thought Leopold was a philanthropist. 1885, the Congo Free State was born, but free was the cruelest lie ever told. This wasn't a colony. It was Leopold's private property, an entire nation owned by one man, accountable to no government, bound by no law. What happened next would become one of history's most carefully hidden genocides. Asterisk, the 1890s, the world discovered pneumatic rubber, tires, bicycles, automobiles. Demand exploded, and the Congo had wild rubber vines everywhere. Leopold saw gold. The Congolese saw hell approaching. Leopold's Forces Publiques, a private army of African soldiers commanded by European officers, descended on villages with quotas. Every man, woman, and child had to collect rubber. Impossible quotas. When they failed, hands the force public cut off hands. Right hands, left hands, children's hands. They smoked them to preserve them as proof of killings, to show they hadn't wasted bullets. Baskets of hands were delivered to officials. Severed hands became currency in Leopold's economy of terror. Villages that resisted were burned. Women and children were taken hostage in houses of hostages until men returned with rubber. Starvation became policy. Rape became systematic. Murder became routine. An entire nation was turned into a labor camp, and the world heard nothing. Asterisk, 1890. An African-American journalist named George Washington Williams traveled to the Congo, expecting to find Leopold's promised paradise. Instead, he found hell. He wrote an open letter to Leopold, titled An Open Letter to His Serene Majesty Leopold II, King of the Belgians and Sovereign of the Independent State of Congo. It was one of the first documented accounts of the atrocities. Williams died a year later under mysterious circumstances, but others followed. Edmund Dean Morel, a British shipping clerk, noticed something impossible. Ships leaving Europe for the Congo carried only guns and ammunition. Ships returning were loaded with ivory and rubber. Where was the trade? There was none. This was plunder. Morel started the Congo Reform Association. Irish diplomat Roger Casement compiled a devastating report with eyewitness testimonies and photographs. American missionary William Morrison captured images that couldn't be denied. Mark Twain wrote scathing satire. Arthur Conan Doyle published The Crime of the Congo. The truth was finally escaping. Leopold never confessed, never apologized, never acknowledged the horror. He built monuments across Belgium with blood money, palaces, museums, triumphal arches. He burned most Congo Free State records before ceding the territory, destroying evidence of his crimes. When confronted, he claimed the reports were exaggerated, lies spread by jealous rivals. He portrayed himself as the victim, a benevolent ruler under attack by Protestant propagandists. Some believed him. Many profited alongside him. Silence, after all, was profitable. Asterisk, 1908. Global outrage finally forced the Belgian government to annex the Congo Free State. Leopold was compelled to cede his private colony. He received compensation of 50 million francs for relinquishing control of land he'd stolen and people he'd murdered. He lived one more year. December 17, 1909. King Leopold II died peacefully in his palace, surrounded by luxury. Never charged, never tried, never punished. He was 74 years old. Behind him, an estimated 10 to 15 million dead, half of Congo's population gone. The Belgian people mourned their king. Statues were erected in his honor. For decades, Belgian children learned he was a builder king, a visionary. The Congo was forgotten. For most of the 20th century, Leopold's crimes remained hidden, minimized, or denied. Belgium's education system whitewashed the history. Congo's suffering continued under Belgian colonial rule until independence in 1960 and even after, as Cold War powers manipulated its politics, assassinated its leaders, and exploited its resources. It wasn't until the 1990s and Adam Hochschild's book, King Leopold's Ghost, that the full scope of the atrocities entered mainstream consciousness. Scholars now classify Leopold's Congo as a genocide, one of the deadliest in human history. Today, the Democratic Republic of Congo remains one of the poorest nations on Earth, despite being one of the richest in natural resources. Coltan for your smartphones, cobalt for electric car batteries, diamonds, gold, copper. The extraction continues, the exploitation continues. Leopold's ghost still haunts the Congo. Juni 2020, amid global protests against racism and colonial violence, Leopold's statues began falling. Protesters in Belgium defaced his monuments. Some were removed by authorities. The king of the Belgians, the Builder King, was finally being seen for what he truly was, an architect of genocide. The Belgian government issued formal regrets, not quite apologies, for colonial atrocities. Museums began adding context to Leopold's legacy. Schools slowly started teaching the truth. But statues, those are easy to remove. Wealth extracted from Congo, that built modern Belgium, that remains, or reparations have been paid. No wealth returned. The Congo River still flows, but it flows through a nation still bleeding from wounds inflicted over a century ago. History asks us an uncomfortable question. How does one man destroy millions? The answer is simpler and more terrifying than we'd like to admit. He doesn't do it alone. Leopold needed European governments to recognize his claim, bankers to fund his venture, companies to sell his rubber, consumers to buy his products, media to ignore or downplay reports. And most of all, he needed ordinary people to look away. The king who destroyed his own people wasn't Congolese. He was European, and his own people was a lie, he told himself. That the Congolese belonged to him, that he had any right to them whatsoever. The real horror is how easily the world accepted that lie, how little it took to convince civilized nations that some lives simply don't matter. The Congolese survived. They survived Leopold. They survived colonial rule. They survived still not because of the mercy of kings, but because of their own resilience, strength, and refusal to be erased from history. This is their story, and it must never be forgotten. Some ghosts must haunt us, not to paralyze, but to remind us the capacity for horror lives not in monsters, but in systems we build, profits we chase, and the silence we choose when others suffer. Leopold's throne crumbled, but the question remains: what thrones do we maintain today? What suffering do we ignore? Whose hands are we willing to sacrifice? For our comfort,